I have been getting into African music over the last few months, and I think I guess it started around 2 years ago when I met this girl from one of my classes who was telling me about how she was going back and forth to Nigeria to study African song and dance, and she was able to spend time with the family of Fela Kuti. At the time, I didn't know who Fela Kuti was, and after I started to explore his music catalog, I think the first thing I listened to was Zombie, and then I listened to Expensive Shit. It pretty much blew me away. I guess the way we have been listening to music doesn't necessarily always incorporate Africa as well as Asia. I think Africa and Asia isn't necessarily the at the forefront of what people normally consider when they think of popular music, at least in the West, I think. And which is unfortunate. I mean, maybe recently you can think of K-pop is probably the biggest wave of Asian music, but African music hasn't really. In my opinion, I mean, it hasn't really gone into the mainstream as concretely over the last 50 years or so. I mean, you maybe when at some point you hear something like Akon becoming famous, but Akon was I think he's Senegalese, but he was born in the U.S. and he was making American music. Um, with some influence from his background. But anyway, so Fela Kuti, incredible jazz musician, and um, you should check out his albums. He is one of my favorite jazz musicians, and he it really opened up my palette to just African music in general. And over the last few months, I've been really trying to get into more of this stuff. And I recently stumbled upon this album called Obaa Sima by this I think is he Nigerian? I think he's a Nigerian guy. His name is Atakak, and he was influenced by a lot of genres. He was influenced by high life, which is a Ghanaian genre. He was influenced by hip hop. He was influenced by pop music, R&B stuff like Michael Jackson and all of this stuff. And from what I understand, it was this lost album of sorts where one day they in I think it was in Ghana, people were there's this guy who was compiling all the music, and he managed to get a copy of the song Obaa Sima, which is what the album was eventually called. Or it might have been, he might have gotten Moma Yendodo or something, and he found the music so compelling because the music is so compelling. It's when I first heard this album, it was incredibly unique. Even within the kind of African music that I've been exposed to, at least I've had limited exposure to, Obaa Sima sounded very special, and it was so interesting that apparently. So what happened was some guy he made a compilation of local music, I think, and someone heard the song from Atakak and was so intrigued by his style of music that he tried to track him down, and it took many years to track him down. He went all over the world, eventually found the guy in Toronto. So apparently the guy actually recorded it in Toronto, and he bought a bunch of secondhand equipment, and he just recorded it on his own in his apartment, and it didn't really necessarily go anywhere. I think he it's not very he wasn't able to mix it properly. Even the final mix doesn't sound the best, and he sent it to his brother, who wasn't really that much of a producer either. And I don't think he necessarily thought the album went anywhere. And several years later, I guess around almost 20 years later or something, someone discovers it and tracks him down and tells him about how incredible he thinks it is and how much potential it has, and it gets re-released. A couple just in 2015, I think, is when it got re-released, and critics everywhere adored it, loved it. So it's I feel like personally, I don't really don't want to talk about. All I want to say is you should listen to this album. It's an incredible album, and it's something fun and unique, and it's something you don't normally hear. Something about the quality of his voice sounds. I don't know how much distortion he has on it, but it's very intriguing to hear, and he does a lot of these repetitive vocal samplings of his own voice going throughout the background of some of the songs in a way that kind of resembles some of the hip hop. I mean, not to make direct comparisons, because I definitely don't think the comparisons are as direct, but most recently, I'm remembering I was listening to all these Kanye Wyoming albums, and I remembered He does this thing with Cop Shot the Kid with the vocal sampling going all over the background of the song, and Atakak, does this similarly. I mean, he made this album in the 90s, of course, and it's also just a staple of hip hop sampling and all this, and it's very similar to when I think of high life music, for example, Fela Kuti's jazz. He does a lot of these repetitive structures that sound borderline psychedelic, but very expansive in the ears and the imagination. And you can maybe argue that perhaps the album doesn't necessarily stray so far from a kind of set up structure that each song brings to the table. You can just maybe listen to the album and think that a lot of the songs do sound kind of similarly structured and similarly put together, but it's in a good way, because it's such a unique way of it's very unique sounding, and it's a 7 song album, and perhaps some of the songs sound a little too long or something, but it's very nice for me, I think, to hear music that I don't normally ever like the sonic when you ever hear new kinds of music. I think it's always worth checking out, and this is what this album is, Obaa Sima, and I don't know exactly, so I don't know any Ghana. I didn't read the translations of the lyrics, so I don't exactly know what he's singing about, but it seems quite positive. I think it seems quite upbeat, and the cover, he's like smiling on it, but I really want to explore more of his high life music, which is Ghanaian music, which he must have been influenced by, although he made it in Toronto, but I want to hear more about. I want to listen to more of this stuff apart from the limited range of African music I already know. I want to explore more of it, because I'm looking at the list of Ghanaian high life artists, and I don't know any of them, and that's kind of exciting for me, because I want to learn more about all this stuff. Recently, I downloaded another album called African Scream Contest. So this is exciting. I'm looking at it, and it looks like it's called African Scream Contest Raw and Psychedelic Afro Sound, so that sounds incredible to me. So I'm excited to listen to that. But anyways, just check this album out. It's called Obaa Sima by Atakak. It came out I think he recorded it and it came out in 94, but it got re-released in 2015. But yeah, I know I didn't probably say as much qualitative things about this album, but just check it out. It's really interesting. It's not too long.